Hello, and welcome to Smart Edition's Anatomy and Physiology Practice Question Review session. As you know, in your nursing entrance exams, you're going to be asked questions about the whole body and all of its systems in random order. And so it's important for you to get practice being able to answer these questions in random order. My name is Galen. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm going to be presenting information to you today. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So which is a characteristic of the bladder? Does it A, store urine? Does it B, filter blood? Is it C, shaped like a bean, or D, reddish brown in color? And the correct answer is answer option A. The bladder stores urine. So this is a question about the urinary system and specifically about the structures found within that system. These include the kidneys, the ureters, the bladder, and the urethra. And as you can see in this table, we have some of the highlights of the characteristics of each of these structures. The kidneys resemble beans. They're reddish brown in color. We actually have a bean called the kidney bean that you can look at if you want to visualize what do the kidneys look like in my body. So we have two kidneys, which filter blood, help regulate water balance and electrolyte levels, and also help eliminate metabolic waste from the body via urine. The ureters are tubes which connect to the kidneys and transport urine from the kidneys to the bladder. The bladder, when it's empty, is a pear shape. It stores urine until the body is ready to expel it. There are 3 openings in the bladder, one for each of the ureters and then one for the urethra. The urethra is the final structure that we'll discuss. It's also a tube and it helps remove urine from the bladder and from the body as a whole. So going back to our question, we're being asked about a characteristic of the bladder. As we've seen, the bladder stores urine. The other answer options, B, C, and D, are all features of the kidneys, as we've just reviewed. So the only answer option that describes a characteristic of the bladder is answer option A, and that's what we're going to go with here. Digestive organs include structures such as villi and rugae. Which of the following is the purpose they serve? A, to increase surface area. B, to increase blood supply, C, to increase mucus secretion, or D, to increase bacterial content. And the correct answer is answer option A. Both of these structures serve to increase surface area. So the stomach is an enlarged segment of the digestive tract. The muscular layer of the stomach is covered with these folds called rugae. And like we just said, they serve to increase the surface area of this organ of the gastrointestinal system. Villi are found in the small intestine, another organ of the gastrointestinal system. There are these finger-like projections, and they're particularly numerous in the duodenum, the first section of the small intestine. Like the rugae of the stomach, villi also increase surface area. So why is it important to have an increased surface area in both of these digestive organs, in both of these organs of the gastrointestinal system? Well, the rugae of the stomach, which are also known as gastric folds or wrinkles, allow the stomach to stretch when full, and they also help grab food and move it around during digestion. Remember that the function of the stomach is to aid in both chemical and mechanical digestion. So the features of the rugae allow the surface area of the inside of the stomach to be increased, and thus they increase the efficiency of digestion. Similarly, the villi of the small intestine help increase the surface area of that organ. Remember that the small intestine is the primary site for nutrient absorption, but chemical digestion also continues in this organ. So the point of both is to maximize the efficiency of digestion, the efficiency of our body's ability to extract all the needed nutrients from the food that we eat and the liquid that we drink. So it makes sense that an increased surface area would allow these organs to accomplish their tasks more efficiently. B, C, and D are not functions common to both of these special structures, the villi and rugae, so we can eliminate those as incorrect. The best answer, as we've seen, is that both of these help increase surface area and thus maximize the efficiency of the gastrointestinal system. Before we move on to the rest of the practice questions, I want to remind you that you don't have to stress when preparing for your TEAS exam. Our TEAS online course eliminates the guesswork of what to study and offers an easy-to-follow online course with visual resources, a mobile app, tons of videos, practice tests, and more. Check out our online course at www.smartadditionacademy.com. Now let's jump back into the A and P practice test questions. Which blood type is the universal acceptor? Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? AB? Or is it D? O? And the blood type known as the universal acceptor is answer option C, blood type AB. So this question is about the cardiovascular system and specifically about blood type. So recall that blood type is determined by a couple of different factors. One is inherited markers on the surfaces of red blood cells called antigens. Antigens tell the body whether or not a cell is foreign and whether or not it is potentially harmful. Blood type is also determined by the presence of antibodies or plasma proteins that are produced in response to and counteract specific antigens. So antibodies bind to antigens and read them, inducing an immune response if they detect a threat. There are 4 major blood types or groups. People with blood type A have A antigens and B antibodies. People with blood type B have B antigens and A antibodies. People with blood type AB have both A and B antigens, but neither A nor B antibodies. And finally, people with blood type O have neither A nor B antigens, but both A and B antibodies. And as if that weren't complicated enough, in addition to antigens, the Rh factor protein might be present on the surfaces of red blood cells. When it's present, we put a plus sign next to the blood type. When it's absent, we put a minus sign next to the blood type. So this increases the number of major blood types from 4 to 8. A positive, A negative, B positive, B negative, AB positive, AB negative, O positive, and O negative. Now when we're determining someone's blood type, we mix a sample of their blood with an antiserum that contains antibodies. If clumping or agglutination occurs during this mixing process, that means that the antibodies have found an antigen in the blood sample with which to interact. So this evidence of agglutination is thus used to interpret the final blood type result from a sample. So with all that information in mind, let's go back to our practice question here. We said that AB is the universal acceptor or recipient. And this makes sense because, as we have just seen, people who have this blood type have neither A nor B antibodies in their plasma. These are the proteins responsible for identifying potentially harmful foreign cells and alerting the immune system to their presence. So, if they don't have these antibodies, their bodies won't identify any other blood type as foreign and will thus not reject any other blood type. So they're able to receive blood from anybody. What about the other answer options here? Well, people with type A blood, as we've noted, have A antigens and B antibodies, so they can accept blood from people who have type A or type O blood. People with type B blood have B antigens and A antibodies, so they can accept blood from people with type B or type O blood. And then people with type O blood have no antigens in their blood, but they have both A and B antibodies, so they can only accept blood from other people with type O blood. So because there are limitations on these other 3 blood types, we can eliminate them as incorrect. The term universal implies they're able to receive blood from all blood types, and as we've seen, that's a characteristic unique to people with type AB. How many muscles must work together during contraction and extension? Is it A2? Is it B10? Is it C206? Or is it D600? And the correct answer is answer option A. So this is a question about the muscular system and specifically how muscles work together to move bones at a joint. Muscles work in pairs to move bones at a joint. The muscle that causes a joint to bend is called the flexor muscle, and the muscle that causes a joint to straighten is called an extension muscle. They work in a seesaw-like motion, so if one muscle in the pair contracts, the other remains elongated or relaxed. So going back to our question here, how many muscles must work together during contraction and extension? Well, if it's a pair, as we've noted, then that can only mean two, because that is literally the definition of a pair. So all of the other answer options, 10, 206, and 600, are far too many for what this question is asking us about specifically. Just as an aside, the number 206 most likely refers to the approximate number of bones in the adult human body, and the number 600 refers to the fact that we have over 600 muscles in the human body. So these are pertinent to the body, but not pertinent to the question that we're being asked. Again, muscles work in pairs to move bones at joints, and since a pair only has two in it, option A is the correct answer. The ventral cavity, front of the body, contains blank major cavities. Is it A2? Is it B3? Is it C5? Or is it D9? And the correct answer here is answer option B. So this is a question about the organization of the human body. So recall that a body cavity is a space filled with fluid that holds and protects internal organs. In our human bodies, we have two major cavities, the ventral cavity on the front and the dorsal cavity on the back. Each of these bigger cavities can be subdivided into smaller cavities. Our question is specifically about the ventral cavity, so that's what we're going to focus on in this review. The ventral cavity can be subdivided into three cavities. The first is the thoracic cavity, which is surrounded by the rib cage and separated from the abdominal cavity underneath it by a muscle called the diaphragm, as you can see pictured here. There's also a structure found in the thoracic cavity called the mediastinum that divides it into right and left halves. Organs in the thoracic cavity include the esophagus, the trachea, the thymus gland, the heart, and both lungs, along with other structures. Below the thoracic cavity, we have the abdominal cavity, which is bounded in the front by abdominal muscles. This part of the ventral cavity contains the stomach, part of the intestines, the liver, spleen, pancreas, and kidneys. Below that is the pelvic cavity, which is enclosed by the bones of the pelvis and contains structures including the urinary bladder, the rest of the intestines, and the internal reproductive organs. It's important to note that sometimes we refer to the abdominal and pelvic cavities collectively as the abdominopelvic cavity. And as you can see in the dorsal body cavity in the back, we have two subdivisions, the cranial cavity and the vertebral, also known as the spinal cavity. But we are being asked again specifically about the ventral cavity in the front of the body, and as we have just seen, there are three major cavities found within this larger cavity: the thoracic cavity, the abdominal cavity, and the pelvic cavity. Now, we did note that sometimes the abdominal and pelvic cavities can be referred to together as the abdominopelvic cavity, but since they are technically two distinct cavities, the correct answer is 3 instead of 2. 2 would be the correct answer if we were being asked about the dorsal cavity, the one in the back of the body. But we're not, so we can eliminate that as incorrect. 9 we can eliminate because that's far too many cavities based on what we just reviewed. And then 5 is the total number of subdivided body cavities that would be found in both the back and the front if we combined them together. But again, that's not what we're being asked about here. We're being asked specifically about the ventral cavity, so we can eliminate that as well. And as we've seen, 3 is the best answer here. Which organ uses hairs to filter out particles that try to enter the lungs? Is it A, the alveoli? Is it B, the bronchus? Is it C, the larynx? Or is it D, the nose? And the correct answer is answer option D, the nose. So this is a question about the respiratory system, and specifically about the role that the nose plays in the respiratory system. So some of the functions of the nose as related to this system include that the nasal cavity warms and moistens air as a person breathes. In addition, the nose helps protect the lungs. And how does it do that? Well, the nose serves as a first line of defense. Our nasal epithelial cells secrete mucus, which help trap potentially harmful particles. There are also tiny hairs found in the nose that serve similar purpose. They trap particles and help filter them out before they can enter further into the body, and specifically into the lungs. Now, when we're looking at the other answer options here, we can eliminate A and B because we're specifically being asked about an organ that filters out particles before they enter the lungs. Since the alveoli and the bronchus are both found within the lungs, if particles had reached these structures already, it would already be too late. We would have already failed in the task that we're being asked about. So we can eliminate those. What about the larynx? Answer option C. Well, this is where our voice box is located. It also serves a function as part of the air conducting portion of the respiratory system. There is a protective feature found in the larynx, but it's not hairs, and it's not part of the immune system. Instead, there's a structure called the epiglottis, which covers the larynx when we swallow, preventing foods and liquids from entering our lungs. So again, it does not fit what we're being asked about in this question. We can eliminate that as incorrect. So A, B, and C are incorrect, and as we've seen, the correct answer option is D, the nose. Okay, what does the skeletal system provide? Is it A, circulation? Is it B, energy? Is it C, immunity? Or is it D, support? And the correct answer is option D, support. So this is a question about the functions of the skeletal system. And these major functions include the following. Support, because both bones and cartilage are rigid, they help support our body posture. They also allow us to remain upright and provide a framework to which soft tissues like muscles and organs can attach. Bones can't move by themselves, but when they're connected to each other by ligaments and helped by the action of muscles, they do help facilitate movement. So that's another major function of this system. The skeletal system also helps protect our vital internal organs from external damage. So protection is another major function of this system. Bones function as a storage site for important minerals like calcium and phosphorus, and they serve as a site for hematopoiesis, or the production of red blood cells. So going back to our question here, the only answer option that lists one of the major functions that we just reviewed is option D, support. And as we've seen, the skeletal system provides a rigid framework to which soft tissues like muscles can attach. It also helps keep our bodies upright and helps us maintain body posture. What about these other features listed here? Well, circulation is a major function of the circulatory system. Energy involves several different systems. For example, our gastrointestinal systems allow us to absorb nutrients like carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, which we can then use for energy. Our endocrine systems help regulate how we produce and how we use energy. So that answer could be several different systems, but not the skeletal system. So A and B are eliminated. And then option C could be the immune system, which includes the lymphatic system. So again, referring to the functions of other systems in the body, not the skeletal system. So we can eliminate A, B, and C, and we're left with D, which is indeed a characteristic of the skeletal system, a function of the skeletal system. During the aging process, not all hormone levels decrease. Some actually increase. Which of the following is a hormone that may increase as a person ages? Is it A, cortisol? Is it B, insulin? Is it C, luteinizing hormone? Or is it D, thyroid hormone? And the correct answer here is answer option C. So this is a question about the endocrine system and specifically how aging affects hormone activity. The aging process can affect hormone activity in one of three ways. Hormone secretion can decrease, it can stay the same, or it can increase. So those hormones that tend to decrease as we age include growth hormone, melatonin, estrogen in women, testosterone in men. Those hormones that tend to remain unchanged as we age include cortisol, insulin, and the thyroid hormones. And hormones that tend to increase as we age include follicle stimulizing hormone, luteinizing hormone, parathyroid hormone, norepinephrine, and in the very elderly, epinephrine. So going back to our question, we've said that the correct answer is luteinizing hormone. Just by way of reminder, this is produced by the anterior pituitary gland. In females, it targets the ovaries and promotes ovulation. In males, it targets the testes and promotes sperm cell production. What about the other answer options here? Cortisol, insulin, and thyroid hormone. Well, as we've seen in that chart that we were just looking at a second ago, all of these tend to stay the same, so they don't tend to increase as a person ages. So we can eliminate those as incorrect because they're not answering the question that we're being asked here. C is the best answer, and that's what we're going to go with here. While hiking, a person is startled after encountering a bear. Her palms get sweaty and her heart starts racing. Which part of her nervous system was directly stimulated? A, the central nervous system, B, the parasympathetic nervous system, C, the somatic nervous system, or D, the sympathetic nervous system. And the correct answer is answer option D, the sympathetic nervous system. So remember that anatomically, the nervous system can be divided into two major sections. The central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord and serves as a site for information processing and control. You can think of it as like the command center. The peripheral nervous system consists of nerves that connect the whole entire body to the central nervous system. As you can see in this flow chart, the peripheral nervous system can be further subdivided into both the somatic and autonomic nervous systems. The somatic nervous system is mostly responsible for our voluntary activities like walking or riding a bike. So this system transmits information between the central nervous system and motor nerve fibers that are attached to skeletal muscle. The autonomic nervous system, in contrast, is responsible for activities that are not voluntary, so those under unconscious control. This system controls things like glands and the smooth muscles found in internal organs. So it governs activities ranging from heart rate to breathing to digestion. And as you can see, it can be further subdivided into two different systems. The sympathetic nervous system deals with non-voluntary processes that are related to emergency situations by preparing the body for fight or flight. The S in sympathetic, you can think of that standing for stress. The parasympathetic nervous system controls involuntary processes unrelated to emergencies. Think of that P as standing for peace. These are known as rest or digest activities. So going back to our question here, we've said that the correct answer is the sympathetic nervous system. So let's prove that that is the case. So remember, this is the branch of the autonomic nervous system, which is the part of the nervous system that controls our involuntary processes that are under unconscious control, and specifically those that have to do with emergency situations by preparing the body for fight or flight. So she's encountered a bear, her palms get sweaty, and her heart starts racing. So I would say that this definitely counts as an emergency situation. And we get further proof that the sympathetic nervous system is being directly stimulated by the symptoms that are described. Her palms get sweaty and her heart starts racing. So these are not things that we consciously will ourselves to do, right? They just happen when we get nervous or when our adrenaline starts pumping, which is exactly what's happening here. And that is a perfect indicator of the actions of the sympathetic nervous system. So in our review, we saw that A, B, and C, though part of the nervous system, serve different functions. Again, what's being directly stimulated here is clearly the sympathetic nervous system, and that is our correct answer. What is the strongest risk factor for skin cancer? Is it A, aging? Is it B, smoking? Is it C, family history? Or is it D, ultraviolet radiation? And the correct answer is answer option D, ultraviolet radiation. So this is a question about the integumentary system. Skin cancer is the most common type of cancer affecting the integumentary system. There are a lot of different things that factor into the development of skin cancer, but the strongest risk factor for its development is exposure to ultraviolet or UV radiation. Major sources of UV radiation include sunlight as well as tanning beds. There are two types of UV rays that can contribute to skin cancer development. UVB rays penetrate the epidermis and are responsible for sunburns and most skin cancers. UVA rays penetrate the dermis and cause our skin to age, but also contribute to skin cancer formation as well. So how does exposure to UV radiation cause skin cancer, lead to skin cancer? Well, it damages our cellular DNA, which causes distinct mutations. If our bodies are unable to correct this damage, the mutations accumulate. As a result, the cells can transform into these cancerous cells that begin to grow uncontrollably. That uncontrolled cellular growth can result in the formation of cancerous tumors. Sometimes these tumors go on to produce cells that end up leaving the original site of DNA damage and establishing new tumors in other organs, other parts of the body. This is called metastasis. So you can see that this is a potentially serious process that starts with something simple, just exposure to UV rays, and can lead to something really catastrophic in the body. So going back to our question here, I did note that there are multiple factors for skin cancer. Well, all three of our other answer options, aging, family history, and then smoking is particularly a risk factor for one type of skin cancer, squamous cell carcinoma. These are all risk factors for the development of skin cancer, but we're being asked specifically what's the strongest risk factor. And as we've seen, that's exposure to UV radiation or ultraviolet radiation. So that's our correct answer here. Which type of immunity does the MMR vaccine provide? Is it A, artificial active? Is it B, artificial passive? Is it C, natural active? Or is it D, natural passive? And the correct answer is answer option A. So this is a question about our lymphatic systems and specifically about our immunity. We humans have two types of immunity. Innate immunity is that with which we are born. It includes both the physical and chemical barriers found within our body. Adaptive immunity develops over our lifetime. It's acquired by both natural and artificial means. So what do those terms mean? Well, natural are those that we just encounter as we go about life, while artificial are those that are given to us in some kind of medicinal way. You can see that both of those categories are further subdivided into both passive and active. What do those terms mean? Well, passive means immunity gained through some other means. It's given to us externally. This type of immunity is short-term. There aren't any memory cells that are made, so our antibodies for this type of immunity are not being continually replenished. They're immediately available after we're given them, but they're not replenished. So this is not long-term immunity. Active immunity is that in which our own immune system is responsible for the protection. So it actually goes through the work of mounting an immune response against a threat, which results in longer term immunity because antibodies and memory cells are created. So let's talk about a couple examples for each type of immunity just to really solidify these definitions here. So natural passive immunity, an example would be babies receiving immunities from their mother's breast milk. While natural active immunity, an example would be the body producing antibodies to combat an illness when a person becomes sick. Artificial passive or antibody transfer, an example of that would be the administration of immunoglobulins, while an example of artificial active immunity is a vaccination. So going back to our practice question, we're being asked specifically about a vaccination, and what we have just seen is that this is an example of artificial active immunity. We've also seen that answer options B, C, and D are better illustrated by other examples, not vaccination. So we can eliminate those as incorrect and option A is our correct answer here. Fertilization usually occurs in the blank. Is it A, ovary? Is it B, vagina? Is it C, uterine wall? Or is it D, fallopian tube? And the correct answer is answer option D, the fallopian tube. So this is a question about the reproductive system, and specifically about the process of reproduction. So this process begins with a male introducing sperm into a female's reproductive system during intercourse. The sperm journey through the female's reproductive system to the fallopian tubes. If there's an ovum or an egg there, the sperm can then fertilize it. And that creates a zygote, which will eventually go on to implant into the uterus, and pregnancy will result. So eggs, or ova, are produced in a female's ovaries. They're then released into a fallopian tube during ovulation. Now, as we've noted, if sperm are present there, fertilization may occur. If an egg is fertilized, as I mentioned, the resulting zygote then moves to the uterine wall for implantation. If fertilization does not occur, the unfertilized egg will be expelled through the vagina during menstruation. So, an easy way to remember this is that fertilization and fallopian tube both start with F. So fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube. These other structures, ovary, vagina, uterine wall, are all involved in the process of reproduction, but as we've seen in our explanation, they have different functions than serving as the site for fertilization. So we can eliminate those three as incorrect, and as we've seen, D is our correct answer. Exchanges of substances like gases and nutrients occurs at the blank. Is it A, arteries? Is it B, capillaries? Is it C, veins? Or is it D, venules? And the correct answer is answer option B, the capillaries. This question is about the cardiovascular system, and specifically about our blood vessels. Remember that blood circulation is a closed-loop system. This means that blood is contained within the structures of the cardiovascular system, specifically the heart and blood vessels at all times. In addition, blood always flows in the same direction. So what are the blood vessels? Well, there are three different types, and they each serve unique functions within this system. The arteries are blood vessels that carry oxygenated blood from the heart to the cells and tissues of the body. Arterioles are small arteries. The capillaries are the smallest of blood vessels. They have the thinnest walls and the largest surface area. These features allow for the exchange of substances between the capillaries and the cells of the body. Veins carry deoxygenated blood from the cells and tissues of the body back to the heart. Venules are small veins. So going back to our question here, we're being asked which type of blood vessel facilitates the exchange of substances, and as we've seen, that is the capillaries. Remember, these have the thinnest walls and the largest surface area, so when blood hits these vessels, blood flow slows down, and that facilitates the exchange of these substances. The arteries, the veins, and the venules all serve different functions, so we can eliminate them as incorrect. Capillaries is the correct answer here. Which activity is most likely associated with microscopic urinalysis? Is it A, observing the color of urine? Is it B, determining red blood cell count? Is it C, identifying the presence of creatinine? Or D, noting the turbidity of a urine sample? And the correct answer here is answer option B, determining red blood cell count. So this question is about the urinary system, and we're focusing specifically on a type of test called a urinalysis. This type of test can reveal whether or not a urinary system disease is present, even if that disease does not necessarily present observable symptoms. So it's a very useful test, and it can include both macroscopic and microscopic means. So what are the differences between those two? Macroscopic urinalysis, the word macroscopic means that which is visible to the naked eye. So this involves the visual observation of urine. Normal fresh urine is pale to dark yellow in color. It's also clear and not cloudy. If the urine is turbid or cloudy, there may be an issue present. Also, if the color is off, if it's red or brown, that indicates an issue, could indicate an issue as well. Another type of macroscopic urinalysis is a urine dipstick test. With this test, a plastic dipstick or paper strip is utilized. It's inserted into the urine sample. There are chemicals on this strip or dipstick that cause it to change color when certain substances are present in the urine at specific concentrations. Medical professionals can then compare the color of the dipstick to a standard chart to analyze a urine sample. As its name implies, microscopic urinalysis requires the use of a light microscope. So typically we spin a urine sample down or centrifuge it in a test tube, which causes a sediment, which contains red blood cells, fat cells, other large particles to clump together and separate from the liquid portion of the urine. We can then take that sediment, mount it on a microscope slide, and analyze it to determine specific components of the urine. So, which activity is most likely associated with microscopic urinalysis? Well, the only answer option here that requires the use of a microscope would be determining red blood cell count, the number of red blood cells in the urine. So answer option B is our correct answer. Answer options A and answer options D correspond to macroscopic urinalysis, and specifically the visual observation of urine. Because answer option C says identifying the presence of creatinine and not it's not asking for a specific number associated with that substance, that has to do with macroscopic urinalysis as well, most likely using a urine dipstick test. So A, C, and D then all have to do with macroscopic urinalysis. So we can eliminate those as incorrect because our question is asking us specifically about microscopic urinalysis. So B, as we've noted, is our correct answer. Which of the following is one of the primary functions of the large intestine? A, to kill bacteria, B, to recycle water, C, to store excess fats, or D, to reduce the amount of waste. The correct answer is answer option B. This is a question about the gastrointestinal system and specifically about the large intestine. The large intestine consists of the cecum, which is the site where the small and large intestines meet. It also consists of the colon, which can be divided into 4 parts: the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, and the sigmoid colon. Other parts of the large intestine include the rectum, pictured here, and the anal canal. So what are the primary functions of this organ? Its primary functions include compressing waste down for elimination and also recycling water for reuse by the body. Remember, our gastrointestinal systems are very efficient at what they do. So they want to get the most out of the food that we eat and the liquids that we drink for use in the body. And recycling water in the large intestine helps contribute to this efficiency. What about the other answer options here? Well, answer option A we can eliminate because the large intestine is actually full of healthy bacteria, which it needs for its regular functionings, things like digestion and immunity. The bacteria in the large intestine help with these things, so A is incorrect. Excess fats are stored elsewhere in the body, not the large intestine. For example, they're stored in the liver, some of them. So we can eliminate that as incorrect because that better describes other places in the body, not the large intestine. And then answer option D is incorrect because the point is not to reduce the amount of waste so much as it is to compress it and again, maximize efficiency of waste elimination. So D, C, and A are incorrect and we're left with answer option B, which as we've seen is the correct answer. Which of the following is a characteristic of an interneuron? A, it forms neural circuits. B, it interacts with effectors. C, it sends impulses to the CNS. Or D, it functions as an efferent nerve cell. And the correct answer is answer option A. Interneurons form neural circuits. So this is a question about the nervous system. Recall that there's a structure called the cerebral cortex, which is made up of gray matter and surrounds the entire cerebrum. The gray matter that makes up the cerebral cortex contains 3 types of neurons or nerve cells. Sensory neurons are afferent nerve cells that send information toward the CNS. This information is obtained through our 5 senses from the external environment. The second type, motor neurons, are efferent nerve cells, meaning that they carry impulses away from the CNS to the effectors, which are typically tissues and muscles of the body. The third type of neuron are interneurons. These are nerve cells that act as a bridge between the other 2 types, the sensory and motor neurons. So interneurons help form neural circuits, which allow the different types of neurons to communicate with each other. So going back to our practice question here, the only answer option that describes a characteristic unique to the interneuron, as we've seen, is answer option A. Answer options B, as well as answer option D, correspond to the functions of motor neurons, while answer option C corresponds to the function of sensory neurons. So B, C, and D are incorrect, and we're left with option A, which, as we've seen, is the best fit here and thus our correct answer. Which statement about puberty is true? A, puberty results from an unfertilized ovum. B, males begin puberty at a younger age than females. C, females begin puberty at a younger age than males. Or D, puberty is a cyclical process occurring in the female body. Excuse me, I'm going to drink some water real quick. Okay, the correct answer option here is answer option C. So this is a question about the reproductive system. So recall that when we're born, we have all the basic structures of the adult reproductive system in place, but some are undeveloped. Puberty is the process by which our reproductive systems become fully developed. It starts around the ages of 10 to 11 in females and 11 to 12 in males, and lasts in both for about 5 to 7 years. During puberty, our secondary sex characteristics also develop. In males, that would include facial hair and a generally larger body. In females, that includes enlargement of the breasts and widening of the hips. So going back to our practice question here, it's true that females begin puberty at a younger age than males, specifically around the ages of 10 to 11, as opposed to 11 to 12 in males. So if C is true, then B logically cannot also be true, so we can eliminate B as incorrect. What about A and D? Well, both of these questions are not referring to puberty. Instead, they're referring to menstruation, which begins during puberty but is a different process, its own unique process. It results from an unfertilized ovum, and it is a cyclical process occurring in the female body. So A and D are referring to something else. B is incorrect because, as we've seen, the correct answer is C. Which of the following organs was never considered vestigial? A, the adenoids, B, the appendix, C, the spleen, or D, the tonsils? And the correct answer is answer option C, the spleen. So this is a question about the lymphatic system. So recall that the spleen serves multiple important functions in our bodies. These include filtering out bad blood cells, storing both blood and iron, and helping fight infection. So it's a part of the lymphatic system and an essential part at that. So what about our other answer options here? What does it mean for an organ to be vestigial? Well, vestigial organs are those which are thought to have lost their useful functions over time. At some point in history, the tonsils, the adenoids, and the appendix were all considered vestigial organs, but nowadays, scientists believe that they're all part of the immune system, specifically the lymphatic system. So the tonsils are found at the back of the throat, and along with the adenoids, which are found at just behind the nasal passage, they serve as a first line of defense, helping filter out germs that enter through the nose and the mouth. The appendix may support the immunity of our guts by serving as a reservoir for good gut bacteria. There's a lot that we still need to learn about these structures. We think that perhaps they're most active during childhood, after which other structures of the immune system take over. But as we've noted, all of them were considered vestigial. So we can eliminate A, B, and D, and what we're left with is option C, the spleen, which is our correct answer. Which is a characteristic of compact bone? A, it's a site of hematopoiesis. B, it's made of dense connective tissue. C, it contains the osteocyte bone cells. Or D, it consists of several openings or pores. And the correct answer is answer option B. So this is a question about the skeletal system, and specifically about the structure of bone. So remember that bone consists of an outer shell called compact bone. Compact bone is made of units called osteons. These are structures that look like cylinders and contain a mineral matrix as well as living bone cells known as osteocytes. Compact bone encloses another type of bone tissue, which is loosely organized and thus called spongy or cancellous bone. As its name implies, spongy bone is lighter and less dense than compact bone. It has these open sections called pores. You can see it pictured at the top of the image here. When we look at spongy bone under a microscope, these pores or sections look like a kitchen sponge, hence its name, spongy. Surrounding the compact bone is a fibrous membrane called the periosteum. This contains blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatic vessels that all help nourish and support the compact bone. To visualize the anatomy of all the different types of bone, it's helpful to view the anatomy of a long bone specifically, and that's what this image is showing here. As you can see, a long bone consists of three major sections: the proximal epiphysis, the diaphysis, and the distal epiphysis. An epiphysis is found at the end of each end of the long bone and consists mostly of spongy bone with a thin layer of compact bone. This is where bone growth occurs. The epiphysis is covered by articular cartilage, which helps decrease friction at joints or sites where bones meet. The center part of the bone, this long shaft, is called the diaphysis, and it consists primarily of compact bone. Inside the long bone is the medullary cavity. This contains both red and yellow bone marrow. Red marrow is where hematopoiesis occurs. Yellow marrow consists primarily of fat cells. So going back to our question here, the only characteristic listed here that's unique to compact bone is option B. As its name implies, compact bone is made of dense connective tissue, which forms a hard protective shell around the less dense spongy bone and provides strength and rigidity to the skeleton. Answer option A corresponds to the red marrow, as we've seen. Answer option C corresponds specifically to the osteons, the cylindrical structures that make up compact bone. And answer option D corresponds to spongy bone. So we can eliminate D, C, and A as incorrect, and we're left with B, which, as we've seen, is our correct answer. What structure plays a role in air conduction? A, the alveolus, B, the capillary, C, the lung, or D, the trachea. And the correct answer is answer option D, the trachea. So this is a question about the respiratory system and specifically about some of the functions of this system. So functionally, we can divide the respiratory system into two parts. The air conducting portion, what our practice question is asking us about, is responsible for the movement of air into and out of the lungs. So it includes structures such as the nose, the mouth, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the bronchioles. The other portion of the respiratory system is known as the gas exchange portion, and it's responsible for the actual exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. It includes the lungs and alveoli of the respiratory system, as well as the capillaries of the cardiovascular system. So going back to our question here, the only structure that is listed that is involved in air conduction is indeed the trachea. The alveoli, the capillaries, and the lungs are all involved in the other function of the respiratory system, the gas exchange function. So we can eliminate A, B, and C as incorrect, and we're left with option D, the trachea, which is our correct answer, as we have just seen. Epidermal cells are found in the blank before traveling to the skin's surface. A, the stratum basale, B, the stratum lucidum, C, the stratum corneum, or D, the stratum granulosum? And the correct answer here is answer option A, the stratum basale. So this is a question about the integumentary system. Remember that the skin is the largest organ found in this system, and it consists of several layers. The outermost layer of the skin is called the epidermis, which consists of keratin, a substance that toughens and waterproofs the skin, stratified squamous epithelial tissue, melanocytes, which give the skin its color, Merkel cells, and Langerhans cells. Now, depending on where it's found in the body, the epidermis can have 4 or 5 layers. These include the stratum basale, which is the innermost layer, as you can see in this image, the stratum spinosum, the stratum granulosum, the stratum lucidum, and the stratum corneum, which is the outermost waterproof layer. Epidermal cells are constantly being replaced in a continuous cycle. New epidermal cells are produced in that innermost layer, the stratum basale, after which they get pushed up or travel up to the outer skin surface. As they go, they fill with keratin and they die upon reaching this outermost layer. So the leftover keratin from the dead cells helps form the stratum corneum. This outer layer of dead epidermal cells is gradually shed from the skin and replaced with new cells. But before we go back to our practice question, let me just point out some unique features of each of these layers which will allow you to tell them apart. So as we said, in the stratum basale, this is where epidermal cells are actively dividing, and they're being constantly pushed up towards the surface of the skin. Above that, the stratum spinosum, this is often known as the prickle cell or spiny layer because the cells here have changed shape. As you can see, they have these spiny projections which help hold the cells together. They've also taken on a squamous appearance, which means that they are scale-like, thin, and flattened. Above that, we have the stratum granulosum. Now, as we noted, as cells move towards the outermost layer of the epidermis, they fill with keratin and die. So the stratum granulosum is distinguished by the fact that there are granules that appear in the cells here. These are granules of both a keratin precursor and glycolipids. So granulosum refers to those granules. We also mentioned that depending on where it's found in the body, the epidermis can have 4 or 5 layers. So the places where it has 5 layers are the palms of our hands and the soles of our feet, because these are the parts of our body that have the most continuous contact with our external environment. So in these parts of the body where there is a 5th layer of the epidermis, that is the stratum lucidum. So this is only present where we have 5 layers as opposed to 4 layers of epidermis. And then finally, the stratum corneum. We've said that this is made of horny scales of dead keratinocytes, which are known as anucleate squamous cells. It also contains keratin, which makes it waterproof. So those are kind of the distinguishing features of each of these layers. So going back to our practice question, epidermal cells are found in the blank before traveling to the skin surface, and out of the answer options presented here, answer option A makes the most sense. These other layers of the epidermis, stratum lucidum, stratum corneum, and stratum granulosum, have different defining features, as we've seen. So we can eliminate those as incorrect, and we're left with A, which, as we've seen, is our correct answer. The negative feedback mechanism that regulates the level of glucose in a person's blood is an example of what type of hormone secretion regulation? A, hormones regulation, B, nervous system regulation, C, blood levels of chemical regulation, or D, intercellular ion concentration regulation. And the correct answer here is answer option C. This is an example of blood levels of chemical regulation. And before we get into that, let me just remind you what a negative feedback mechanism is. So this is a mechanism that when there are deviations in different substances and processes in the body from a set range, those deviations are resisted or corrected and returned to normal. So these are essential for maintaining homeostasis, that relatively constant, stable internal environment that our bodies need to function normally. And this question is specifically about the endocrine system. So hormone secretion is controlled by these negative feedback mechanisms, which, as we've noted, help maintain homeostasis. So these mechanisms can regulate hormone secretion in one of three ways. Some hormone secretion is controlled by the blood levels of certain chemicals. For example, the levels of glucose in the blood control insulin secretion. Other hormones are controlled by other hormones. For example, hormones from the pituitary gland can act on the ovaries and the testes, causing those organs to secrete sex hormones. And then finally, some hormones are controlled by the nervous system. For example, epinephrine is released from the adrenal medulla as a result of nervous system stimulation. So those are the three types of ways that negative feedback mechanisms can control hormone secretion. So going back to our question, we are indeed being asked about blood levels of chemical regulation. Because not only do we know that the levels of glucose in the blood control the secretion of the hormones that help regulate blood sugar, particularly insulin and glucagon, but we're also being asked about the level of a chemical, glucose, in a person's blood. So that confirms that we've got the right answer with option C. So options A and option B are types of hormone regulation, as we've seen, but they don't fit what we're being asked about in this question here. So we can eliminate those as incorrect. We can also eliminate answer option D, intercellular ion concentration regulation, because as we've seen, this is not one of the ways that hormone secretion is regulated by negative feedback mechanisms. So all that to say, option C is our correct answer. Which anatomical position promotes access to the stomach? Is it A, medial? Is it B, prone? Is it C, superficial? Or is it D, supine? And the correct answer is answer option D. The supine position promotes access to the stomach. So just by way of review, when we're talking about anatomical position, we're referring to a person standing erect with the feet forward, the arms hanging down at the sides, and the palms of the hands facing forward. When we're using directional terms, we're always referring to the body in anatomical position, regardless of its actual position, and this is to eliminate confusion. So directional terms help us understand where structures in the body are located relative to other structures, but specifically when the body is in this anatomical position. So going back to our question here, which position promotes access to the stomach? And we've said that the answer is supine. When a person is supine, they are lying flat. Both their face and their torso are facing upward. And that would indeed grant easy access to the stomach. So it makes sense that that is the correct answer. But what about our other answer options? Let's confirm that we have the right answer. Answer option B, the prone position, is a position in which a person is lying face down, so it would be hard to get to their stomach because their back would be facing up and their stomach would be facing down if they were in this position. So B is incorrect. It would not promote easy access to the stomach. Our other two terms, medial and superficial, are not positions. Instead, they're directional terms. So the term medial means toward the midline or toward the middle of the body, while the term superficial means toward or on the surface of the body. So since they're directional terms and not positions, we can eliminate them as incorrect as well. So A, B, and C are incorrect. D, as we've seen, makes the most sense for what we're being asked about, and that is our correct answer. All right. This is the last practice question. So which is a characteristic of smooth muscle? A, it enables blood vessels to constrict. B, it contributes to bone and joint flexibility. C, it plays a role in how fast the heart contracts. Or D, it consists of striated fibers that are branched. And the correct answer is answer option A. So this is a question about the muscular system. Remember that in our bodies, we have three different types of muscle: cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. Cardiac muscle is found in the heart. Cardiac muscle cells are striated. They have these stripes. They're also short, branched. They contain one nucleus, and they are rectangular. The contraction of cardiac muscle is involuntary. It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Like cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle is also striated or striped, but it is found attached to bones throughout the body. The shape of skeletal muscle is different as well. The cells are long and cylindrical, and each one contains many nuclei. Skeletal muscle contracts voluntarily, meaning that it is under our conscious control. The third type of muscle cell found in the muscular system is smooth muscle. This is found in the walls of internal organs like the bladder and stomach, but it's also found in blood vessels. Smooth muscle cells are not striated, so that's a difference from the other two types of muscle cells. So they don't have those stripes. They're also spindle-shaped. They contain one nucleus. Smooth muscle contraction is involuntary and controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So with that information in mind, going back to our practice question, we've said that smooth muscle is found in the walls of internal organs, also in blood vessels. It enables blood vessels to constrict and dilate, so it controls the size of the blood vessel lumen, the hollow space in the middle of the blood vessel. It also regulates blood flow. What about our other answer options here? Well, answer option B could refer to either skeletal muscle or connective tissue associated with the muscular system, but it does not refer to smooth muscle, so we can eliminate that as incorrect. And options C and D clearly refer to cardiac muscle, not to smooth muscle. So we can eliminate those as incorrect as well. So B, C, and D are incorrect, and we're left with A, which, as we've seen, is our correct answer. That was a lot of information. I know I talked really fast, but hopefully I was speaking quickly and clearly, and you were able to retain and understand. As I said, if there were any questions that really tripped you up, or any systems that you thought, wow, I don't remember that, or I need to review that further, I would encourage you to refer to the Smart Edition website, where you'll find in-depth information and video help on each system, as well as a plethora of practice questions that you can go through to help really reinforce the information about those systems. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for hanging in there as we flew through that. Again, I hope that that was helpful to you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I wish you great success on your nursing exams whenever you might be taking those.